It worked because the fraud hadn't arrived yet. You still operate in a high trust environment. Those days aren't coming back. You can be mad at me. You can be frustrated by the agent of change. And that's essentially what we are. We're the agent of the change that's coming. The reliance upon communicating over unsecure channels like phone and email are proven that it's not sustainable. Thousands of carriers have had their email inbox compromised. That trend is in motion and won't stop until it's fully comprehensive, where break cons don't come as attachments to emails. There's no going back.
In this week's episode, we interview Jordan Graft, the founder and CEO of Highway. Jordan opens up with a wild historical analogy. The fraudsters in our industry are like the Vikings at the gates of Paris. They're not leaving, and that means that the way we move a truckload has fundamentally changed. We get into why PDF rate confirmations in your inbox are on the way out, why Highway is rolling out driver-level identification on every load, facial recognition, the whole thing, his stance on leased-on operators that's going to ruffle some feathers, and why he says the high-trust days of brokerage are never coming back. Before we get into it, FreightCaviar print issue number 3 is almost on its way. If you'd like to subscribe and get a hard copy of our print magazine, go to print.freightcaviar.com. Many industries have gone through what we've gone through, banking, insurance, with the fraud and all that stuff. Tell us a little more about all that, where you're just...
The easiest corollary, I think, to use is in banking. And like if you have a father or grandfather, older gentleman, you can talk to, or older woman, and be like, what was borrowing from a bank like in the 70s, in the 50s, in the 30s? Like, what was it like? Ask them questions about, what they were required to present in terms of verifying collateral and such when they wanted to borrow money from banks that time ago. And you look at what it's like to purchase a home today and how much they verify about you, and how much they're doing independently of what you tell them, and how they're using independent sources. I mean, today when you buy a home, very little is relied upon what you actually say, right? In the application. What they're actually doing in that application is they're having you answer to see how truthful you're going to be to the sources of truth they're comparing it to. Mm-hmm. That's the future of where we're going with trucking. There's just no other way. There's the reliance upon communicating over unsecure channels like phone and email are proven that it's not sustainable. You can't do it at scale because of the amount of fraud and the ability of criminals to compromise those channels on behalf of reputable carriers. So the future where we're going is off, is what we talked about, which is how much the authenticity of the underlying transaction. Like, did it really happen? Did it really occur? Did the truck show up that was supposed to show up? Was the driver who was in the truck who was supposed to be in the truck? Are they insured, both the truck and the driver? And when they pick up and deliver, was it done as it was communicated? That was anybody that's been in this industry for more than 15 minutes knows that there is a whole lot of freight that gets moved and it doesn't get moved. There's a whole lot of freight gets moved and people turn the other way. Mm-hmm. And that over time will have to be brought to light. And because while trucking may no longer be in some ways regulated like it was prior to the Motor Carrier Act of 1980, it's regulated by insurance. The insurance markets regulate trucking. The insurance companies tell us what we do and don't have to do. I mean, a lot of what we get asked to do in Highway on behalf of our customers is because their insurance requires it. And that's, the insurance of the brokerage is requiring, hey, for, this new process has to be put in place because of the fraud we've seen there. Yeah. And so, in a lot of ways, we're regulated by insurance, and that is what it is. You can complain about it, not like it, but in the end, the insurance companies drive most of the operational control behavior patterns of most industries.
Currently, what is your, overview of these insurance companies? Are they doing a good job?
Well, yeah, it's a competitive market. They operate in a competitive market in insurance, right? They're competing to win business based on premium rates and coverage rates, and so it's a competitive market, and so they're doing what they can, and they're trying to prevent losses. They're in the business of not losing money, mm-hmm. as insurance companies, and so when they see a vector or a pattern of behavior emerging, they're saying, hey, this is a new thing that we see, and you have to implement this control. Well, a lot of times to get that control implemented, it requires third-party assistance from someone like Highway or another third-party tool that it helps the broker meet the requirement of what the insurance companies are requiring. I think they're doing a good job in the sense that they're delayed, they're lag. It's always on a lag. Insurance markets and their changes always are on a lag because they're using loss data. It's never as tight to the actual loss events as we want to be at Highway. We want to be ahead of that curve and helping like find the new vector before it becomes prominent and widespread and causes a bunch of losses.
This episode is also brought to you by Chain. If your brokerage still has dedicated track and trace teams, your visibility provider isn't enough. Chain is an AI-powered visibility platform that handles up to 85% of tracking work automatically. Brokers use Chain to reduce manual tracking and scale without adding headcount. Learn more at trychain.com.
I want to learn from you what you think the future of this kind of relationship between the broker and the carrier will look like, especially when you need to verify extensively who you're operating with. Because we went from like a trusted environment to a not so trusted environment. Right now is, you really can't trust anyone over the phone or via email. So I would like to learn about that. How do you see that happening? Like, wouldn't you say right now it's already very extensive, extensive research or kind of like every broker is checking carriers on a highway? Like, do you see a deeper level than that?
Yeah, the fraud's really moved from the fleet level compliance, which is where Highway started, and what, when you say checking a carrier on Highway, you're talking about fleet level compliance. It's really moved from there to the process of booking, to the rate confirmation delivery. It's moved, outside of like it's continuing to move as Highway changes and evolves and shuts down vectors and patterns. It's moving. And so for, how you get a rate confirmation today, how you got a rate confirmation 6 months ago, where you came over as an attachment to an email, that won't happen in 6 months. It just, whether they use Highway's product to deliver it or they secure it their own way, you're no longer going to receive PDF attachments or rate confirmations on emails. Like, it's going to be a link that's secure, that's behind MFA, for you to get access to that information. Just like when your bank sends you your bank statement, they don't attach it as a PDF. You have to click the link and log in. So I'd say that's one, it's very specific. And I remember we launched the rate confirmation delivery product over a year ago. And we first launched it, no one wanted to change process. Carriers didn't want to change and brokers didn't want to change. They're all like, we have our process. This is going to disrupt our process. And what happens in that moment is that you have this balance between the losses that are created and the cost of change management. When the losses exceed the cost of the change, that's when real change happens. So the product was there literally almost dormant. Very few brokers used it for 6 months. And then finally, all the vectors kept getting shut down. More brokers started using Highway for fleet compliance, and it moved almost solely to process, how the process and the delivery of rate confirmation documents. And that's when we saw the adoption uptick, is when it just got so painful. Thousands of carriers have had their email inbox compromised. And so you can't rely on the security of that inbox. When you can't rely on the security of the inbox, you can't send sensitive documents into it. And so I'd say that is a perfect corollary to bank. Banks at some point sent bank statements as attachments to emails. That stopped when fraud caused it to stop. And the same is that trend is in motion and won't stop until it's fully comprehensive, where rate cons don't come as attachments to emails. There's no going back.
That's one aspect of it.
Yeah.
Is the rate cons. And so now with the Highway tool, you get a secure link, and the MFA is basically you verify that through the Highway link. How does that look like? Yeah,
you click on the link, and it makes you authenticate through Highway, through your existing credentials in Highway, and then you can download the PDF and access the PDF of the rate confirmation. There will be additional things that change on that. Like, we're announcing the TI Know Your Driver, where we're going to start doing driver level IDV on every load, as brokers require that. And
what is the IDV?
IDV, the identity verification with facial recognition compared to driver's license. We've done IDV on probably over 500,000 people at this point in the supply chain. And so we're going to have to, take that over probably 2 million, as every driver's going to have an IDV.
What does that look like from the driver's point of view?
It's going to require greater transparency to who's actually picking up the load, right? Because the fraud is now, as it continues to move, it's getting closer to fraud at pickup. And that's, hey, I expect this carrier and this driver to show up, and allowing the facility that is permitting access to be able to validate, okay, that is the driver and the truck that are here.
It's the shipper validates.
Yeah.
So the shipper gets some kind of information from highway, or?
Today, primarily through brokers.
Okay.
We help facilitate that information. Here's the driver, here's the VIN, here's the truck. They're on the scheduled driver policy and on the scheduled auto policy. Like that when I say you're going to require higher levels of authenticity and authentication, like that's one of them. At the point of entry, there's going to have to be prescriptive, hey, this is the individual and this is the truck that should be here, not just they have the PO number. That is no longer going to be enough to permit access because the PO number is just a single point, right? You're going to need multiple points that have to all match in order to unlock access.
Okay.
And that's where we're going. If you want to know where we're going, and if you had to ask me, like, what are the biggest changes that are going to impact carriers they need to prep for, is one that's already in flight. They've already seen rate cons be delivered by highway because a lot of brokers are using it. But just brace yourself that rate cons will no longer be attachments to emails. And the second is requirement at access to the facility is no longer just going to be showing up with a PO number. So that means their operations are going to need to be tighter and more prepared to provide updates to changes to drivers, because it changes. Trucks break down, people get sick, people don't show up for work, things happen. But being able to communicate more effectively in real time which individual, which truck are showing up to the facility for that load, this is going to be a requirement. And again, you blame us, it's fine, I don't care. Thick skin.
Well, you get a lot of pushback, right?
But yeah, because it's complicated. Because it's hard. I know it's complicated. It's hard, and like unfortunately, that's just where it's going. Because to meet the insurance requirements, to meet the requirements of like to prevent losses, more authenticity is going to have to come to the surface. Mm-hmm. Now, for the carrier side, what I would say is to their benefit, and like what we advocate for, and what we are working with Triumph for, is carriers need more protection, financial protection for payment. Like, this idea that, FMCSA's $75,000 surety bond is, all that's required to get your brokerage authority and run up hundreds of thousands of unpaid bills on carriers and leave them hanging. That's no longer acceptable. And so I think carriers, what they rightfully deserve is greater certainty of payment. Like when I run a load for you, I'm going to get paid. And that's something that at Highway, like we've taken early steps with Triumph on. With what we do with TFX, the Trusted Freight Exchange, making sure that the brokers that are posting freight there on TFX, on the Trusted Freight Exchange, can actually pay the bill, can actually pay the invoice. Mm-hmm. And so for carriers, what I tell you is, in this world of increased authenticity, what is going to be a benefit to them is Highway's rolling out additional tools for carriers to help them understand who's the broker and can that broker actually pay me? After I do all this work, does that broker have the ability to pay me? And I think carriers not just deserve that. I think they should demand that, to understand that, hey, make sure I get paid. That should be a requirement of a broker to do business, that they have the financial wherewithal to make the payment.
Today's episode is also sponsored by Rapido. Rapido connects logistics and supply chain organizations in North America with the best nearshore talent, scale efficiently, operate on par with US-based teams, and deliver superior customer service. Rapido works with businesses from all sides of the logistics industry, including 3PLs, carriers, and logistics software companies. Rapido builds out teams to roles across customer and carrier sales and support, back office administration, and technology services. The team at Rapido knows logistics and people. It's what sets them apart. Rapido is driven by an inside knowledge of how to recruit, hire, and train within the logistics industry, and a passion to build better solutions for success. Learn more about the Rapido solution and begin building your team away from home at gorapido.com.
Yeah, I think there's obviously like a process when it comes to getting used to these, working differently in many ways, identification. And even last year you had some pushback when it comes to the recon, and then the cost of the losses or the cost of the mistakes that were made were much greater than having some behavior change when it comes to that. So I see identification of the drivers being a big focal part of Highway, and then also the rate confirmation delivery. How big of an impact those two would they have on the industry if they would be adopted? I
would say it's more than 10%, less than 25% of freight has some sort of variance in what happens versus what the hiring authority thought, the hiring broker thought was going to happen, in terms of like the truck that actually showed up, There's a lot of use of local drivers around certain large major metropolitan markets. Whether the broker is aware of it or not, that's not what I'm trying to say. Like, I'm not saying it is always illicit activity. That's what makes it so hard. Is sometimes it's everyone's fully aware. A local driver is going to pick it up.
Yeah.
It's not the carrier that was on record on the rate con or
Sure, it might get consolidated.
But yeah, it's going to get consolidated, and like the broker wants the carrier to do that to reduce costs. And it's fully above board and what everyone wants to do to reduce costs.
Yeah.
That's what makes all this so hard. Is like there's a variance in like what is in a traditionally prescribed truckload movement of A to B, one carrier. This truck's works. This truck is insured and owned by this carrier, and this driver is on the driver policy. Like that is like when you prescribe like what most people think of in a truckload transaction, and from a like regulatory compliance and insurance world, like that's what you assume to happen. And when you enter the variance of what really happens out in the wild, which, like I said, is less than 25%, but probably more than 10%, the variance of like that doesn't happen, where there's multiple parties involved. What that creates is the confusion for where the fraud lives, and that's why I say the greater authenticity is going to be required. Like it's not necessarily that the broker. It's not necessarily that the broker is saying, carrier, you can't do that. You can't send a local driver. It's just that's going to have to be communicated in advance with information about who's actually picking up before they'll get access to the facility to pick up the load. Like that's and we're talking. Look, there's always edge cases in our wonderful, beautiful industry. There's the rule and there's exception to the rule, and there's always exceptions, which is part of the pain that we deal with. But if you're asking me what's coming, if you just want to brace for impact, what's coming is just greater preventative care, meaning we're preventing things from happening, is going to be around the authenticity of who is actually the individual actually coming to pick up this load.
So I'm curious about like what do you think of the pushback that you get from certain carriers? I know there's I talk to a lot of carriers, and sometimes they think that you're going overboard with all this verification stuff, and in many ways it's like they're not used to it, right? They've been used to kind of like less maybe compliance dealing with the brokers and stuff. But what is your take on that? Like when because I'm sure there's a lot of great carriers that also are really happy with it too.
Yeah, and what I will always like to say to carriers, highway's not perfect. And Brittany and I have taken phone calls and supported carriers like in the middle of the night. I can name you probably half dozen where I've been on the phone with a carrier who has a real issue that's not their fault, and it's either something highway's done wrong, something the FMCSA's done wrong. Like I can give you an example where the FMCSA had authority history wrong on a carrier, and it was wiping out his business, and he reached out asking for help and literally got out of bed at 10:30 at night to go fix it in highway so that this carrier could get running. And like we care, like Brittany and I care, and our whole team care. When I say Brittany and I care, I talk about like Brittany's my wife, you don't know, our COO. And I say that first starting there is like at the highest level of highway, we care, and we want good carriers to not be impacted. At the same time, the carrier community needs to understand is we deal with a lot of wolves in sheep's clothing. We deal with a lot of people come through who have bad intentions, who are doing everything they can to obfuscate that intention and appear to be someone in distress. Because when you see someone in distress and you care, you want to go help them. And so, just like the first thing I tell you is highway's not perfect. And so like we will own mistakes when we know we've made a mistake. The second thing I would tell you is, when you do something wrong, when you've done something wrong, when you've double brokered a load and you didn't communicate in advance, there are certain decisions you make that highway can't save you from. And it's not because we're saying that you're a bad person or bad things happen. Just when you make choices in life, there's consequences and benefits. Good choices have benefits, bad choices have consequences. And we deal in facts. And if the fact is that the MC was sold and it's under new ownership, and we know it and we've identified it and flagged the MC is sold, and the new owner doesn't like it because he can't get freight, that's a fact. And I can't change facts. If you double brokered a load and the broker wasn't happy about it and reported it and didn't pre-approve you to do it, and it truly was double brokered, those are facts. I can't change facts. And this is element of like there's the element that highway has to deal in truth. And if there's issues with it, if it's the truth and you don't like it, I don't know, we can't always help you. We can't help you. The third thing I would say is the vast majority of carriers go in and out of highway day in, day out without issue. I mean, the vast majority. We have 175,000 fleets that interact with highway at some point throughout the month. I mean, just the scale of it, right? I mean, it's close to 300,000 individual carrier users are interacting with highway at some point throughout the month. It is a large amount of people. And so, you know, we have to run our business. We have to make decisions based on the preponderance of the people, like what is working for the preponderance of people. If you know, as a carrier, if you're making, if you're taking choices in how you structure your business, you're say like lots of leased on drivers, lots of leased on carriers, but you yourself are a very small entity. Like, just stepping back for a second, there are things that a large fleet like Knight-Swift may do that works for Knight-Swift because they're a massive company with a massive balance sheet. And if something goes wrong, they'll step in and pay the difference. For example, they have a lot of leased on drivers. JB Hunt has a lot of leased on drivers. They can do that because they have this huge balance sheet that if something happens, right, the leased on entity doesn't have the insurance or something, you know, there's an issue with insurance, an issue with, you know, a claim, they stand in and pay it, right? It's not the same for a guy with one truck who has 5 leased on operators running under his MC. It creates tremendous amounts of risk for the system. And it's really hard, I think, for people sometimes to see that. It's not the same. I know JB Hunt and Knight-Swift have leased on drivers and run owner operators. It's different. They have a huge balance sheet behind it. And so a lot of, I think, where people get tripped up in highway is they say, well, he's leased on to me. And, you know, it's a leased on operator. It's all good. He's covered under my MC. Well, he's really not. If he's not on your insurance, he's not on your insurance. There's no, you know, it doesn't work, right? Like, and if the insurance that we're provided for your fleet, for your MC number, is the insurance that we're all looking to. It's the all in the policy where the rate confirmation and the broker carrier agreement is all pointed towards that insurance policy. And if the truck isn't on there that you're sending in because it's leased on or whatever, it's just not going to work anymore. And I would say over half of our issues that we deal with carriers is that. It's just this idea of like, I'm running leased on drivers. Man, I would just say, look, until you get to 10 trucks of your own trucks, it doesn't make sense. Just financially, because it creates so much risk for everyone else in the transaction. It may work for you, and yes, there's revenue opportunity for you, but when something goes wrong and the underlying entity can't stand up and you're the facing entity on the contract and you can't make payment, then that's when we have issues and that's when things break down. And so I think the idea and construct of leased on operators is an area where I would like to see, you know, if you ask me FMCSA, I'd like to see people take a stance of that it requires a stronger financial position as a carrier to go and engage in those activities than what is required today.
No, I mean, and what I'm seeing is like just the evolution of highway. You know, you keep making it more complex and adding tools because that's what you need to protect yourself. Because like I'm assuming when you started highway 4 or 5 years ago, maybe the gist of highway was a lot different than it is now, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the gist, I'd say highway's always been about carrier identity, but the function, the form and function has absolutely evolved over time as patterns have changed, as we've solved one problem and moved to the next. We don't view ourselves, we will never solve this problem. Like if there's, you know, the global issue of fraud, which we just described, is anytime you have a financial loss resulting from something happening that you didn't expect to happen. Right? Anytime that there was, you know, something was conveyed to you that should happen this way and it doesn't happen that way, there's financial loss, we call that fraud. And so that takes many forms. And so as we stop and help prevent fraud in certain areas, it changes. And so absolutely our form and function has changed. And if it doesn't change monthly, weekly, if it's not changing, continuing to evolve, then we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing, which is, you know, making sure we protect the networks of our freight broker customers. What I would encourage carriers to think about highway, you know, a lot of people like to say it's Big Brother, and we're giving, taking this information and data on carriers and giving it to brokers to give brokers an upper hand on carriers. And I would tell you that is, number one, not our intention. Number two, if you can give me a documented evidence on how Highway is doing that, let me know and I'll make sure it doesn't happen, right? And specifically around ELD data. We would hear this a lot in the beginning. And I want to give you an anecdote about how a carrier can test to say what I'm saying is true. Is they say, well, the broker will know if I'm on the north side of Chicago versus south side of Chicago and try and charge, offer me a different rate. We don't show that level of specificity. We don't show that level of precision to a broker if you're not on a low. We just show generally where trucks are. And I would encourage carriers to know that our intention is to not give the broker an upper hand in negotiating rate. Our intention is to give our broker a window into the truth of what's really happening out there in the wild. It's not to have a power advantage to cause them to be able to take advantage of motor carriers and precarious positions. It's really to help them prevent the broker from getting themselves in a precarious position of hiring someone pretending to be a motor carrier that they're not. Mm-hmm. And if you look at Highway's future, for motor carriers, what I would say is you look at our future and where we're going, more of our roadmap than has historically been allocated, more of our roadmap will be allocated to how we help carriers understand who they're engaging with and the contractual terms that they're engaging with. Because I would tell you, as a motor carrier, I know it's incredibly difficult. I mean, look, it's hard for us at Highway. I mean, the other day there was a LinkedIn post from someone with new broker authority complaining about how Highway wouldn't sell them a license. And Highway would just said, no, we won't sell to you. And we wouldn't give the person at broker authority trying to buy a license to Highway, we wouldn't tell them why. And so know that the reality of what was happening is Highway has these rules internally about which brokers we allow to sign up for Highway. And we don't disclose those. We don't disclose because if we disclose them, the bad actors will figure it out and figure their workaround around them. And so we got on a call with this individual who's frustrated. And we said, look, man, at Highway, we're trying to prevent bad actors on the broker side from getting in and getting access to the Highway to be able to use it to commit fraud, either financial fraud by not paying motor carriers if they've hired them and the motor carriers done the work, or using this data to figure out how to work around some of the internal systems at Highway. And so I would tell you, as a motor carrier, I sympathize with you. It's incredibly difficult for us to say no to brokers who want to pay us money to have access to Highway. Say, I'm sorry, but we're not the right tool for you, because we see a pattern of activity that makes us believe that you're not necessarily just in this to broker freight and pay carriers.
So that's the reason he wasn't let in, or they weren't let in, because of that, because you recognize there's a pattern. It wasn't just because they were a new entity, right?
There's a combination of things. Not always new entity, but the new entity increases risk. When you're a brand new entity, when you're a brand new, whatever your MC number for a motor carrier, an MC number for a broker, or a brand new, whatever it is, you're higher risk. A brand new gas station, brand new real estate investment company, brand new bank, brand new whatever. Wow. And just in the history of the galactic universe, anytime you have a new entity, it has more perceived risk and more realized risk, primarily because there's no operating history, no credit history. There's no basis to which to say I can judge your ability to pay invoices or do what you say you're going to do. And you say, well, just take my word for it. Well, when you're organizations of size and scale, you can't do that. You have to operate just like banks do with credit reports. You have to operate on some level of history to be able to have a scalable enterprise. Otherwise, you just have people out making personalized decisions, and that creates chaos.
This is something that I think just came to mind right now, and I would like to hear your take on it.
Yeah.
The market's changing. This is going to be probably one of the hotter markets we've seen in many years, probably since Highway came to existence. So I'm curious, do you think a hot market will change the way brokers use Highway? Because whenever there's a hot market, brokers tend to just kind of they tend to ignore some signs just because they need capacity. And I'm curious, do you have any take on this at all? Do you expect brokers to be like, hey, maybe we don't need to do this right now, or maybe we just ignore what Highway says because I really need that truck to be there at the shipper?
That will 100% happen. 100% will happen. As long as human beings continue to remain profit maximizing the individuals and their economic behavior, and as long as those human beings are employed in the corporations of freight brokerages, they will absolutely, when times of urgency and ability to make additional profit by turning towards risk, That happens. It happens in banking. It happens in every market where people turn towards risk in moments of a market turmoil or a market movement. But I would say, so yes, that's going to happen. Does that change our mission at Highway to provide greater truth to the underlying transaction? No. Yes, during the cycle, during the change of the market conditions, will there be less advancement on certain things? Absolutely. But the ultimate goal here is to have an underlying transaction that every party can rely on. And that there's a truth that this is the underlying transaction. This transaction was the truth about how it originated, the truth about how it progressed, and the truth about how it was the truth about how it completed. And because there's so many parties that rely upon that information. It's not just the broker, it's the carrier, right? It's not just the carrier, it's the factoring company. It's not the factoring company, it's the insurance company. All these parties need greater visibility to the truth of the underlying transaction. And that's our vision of what we want to provide to all parties. And that's why we're not a brokerage, we're not a motor carrier, we're not an insurance agent, we're not a factor, we're not an ELD provider, we're not any of the things of the, we're not a dispatch service, we're not any of the things that would conflict us with any of the parties which we want to serve in a greater way to provide them greater information about what really happened. What really happened here. Because when you have that greater view into the truth of what really happened, it allows people to build more scalable systems, it reduces losses, and it builds trust. It builds trust on, hey, this is actually something I can rely on.
Yeah, I mean, the next phase is the Trusted Freight Exchange, right? The TFX. That's kind of where Highway's headed, because you just mentioned all the things that you're not, becoming, but you have a marketplace, right? Essentially, how would you define TFX?
It's not a marketplace, it's an exchange, which is a different marketplace seeks to consolidate power into itself to facilitate the conforming transactions, and itself is the key, rules over all participants in the marketplace. An exchange is very different. An exchange is a steward of the resources given to it by its participants, and it serves the keys who are the participants that are actually facilitating, bringing about and executing the transactions. So we don't seek to lord our power over them. We seek to say, hey, what can we do to help facilitate a greater trust between each other by providing the truth and the stamp of authenticity that this actually happened the way that it said it was supposed to happen. And that allows the participants to be the king instead of us being the king as a marketplace and dictating pricing, dictating margin, dictating who can run these that is not our role. Our role is to provide the evidence of the information, and then allow the counterparties to decide whether they would like to transact.
Sure. So carriers and brokers could transact on the TFX and have some assurance that this is, first of all, a trusted carrier, and vice versa, as a trusted broker.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. If you look at when you started at Truck Freight 15 years ago.
It was 11 years ago. Yeah.
11 years ago. Okay.
Yeah.
Carried call in off a posted load on a public load board.
Yeah.
And you look up their MC number in Safer, you look up their MC number in, Carrier 4-1, and see if there's any freight guard reports, and if they had active authority, you load the carrier. And it worked. And it worked because the fraud hadn't arrived yet, and you can still operate in a high trust environment. And those days aren't coming back. And just, they're not. And I don't know, you can be mad at me. You can be frustrated by the agent of change. And that's essentially what we are. We're the agent of the change that's coming. We're not the cause. We're not the underlying force that's driving it to be brought to bear. But it's coming for us. It's coming because that doesn't work anymore. If you did that 10,000 times, if you did what I described, 10,000 times, you would lose a lot of freight.
And that's a wrap on this week's episode. Big shout out to Jordan Graft for sitting down with us to discuss Highway and where the future of freight is headed. Also, real quick, if you're interested in subscribing to our print magazine, issue number 3 is almost on its way. You can head to print.freightcaviar.com to get your subscription.